You are listening to the Techie Leadership Show with Bogdan and Andrei.
Hello and welcome to the Techie Leadership Show. Today with me I have Ron Lichty. He is the author of one of the very few books on managing software people and teams, a book published by Addison Wesley called Managing the Unmanageable. It already sounds amazing. I know it's going to be like a great interview, and probably Ron has amazing stories. Through his career, he's been a programmer, a manager, a director, a VP of engineering, and a CTO. He now consults in helping software teams find both improved outcomes and increased joy. Hi, Ron.
Hey, how are you?
Good. You?
Great.
Do you want to add something else to the introduction?
I think that's about as succinct as you can get. So I've had a long career as a programmer, and then as a manager of programmers and programming teams and product teams, and I've pretty much managed everybody, every different role on product teams.
Well, then you have to have a lot of stories. So I'm really looking forward. So without much further ado, what's the biggest leadership success story that you've witnessed and you would like to share with us?
So, I was a programmer for 7 years, and then I began managing. My opportunity to manage came from Apple Computer. Apple made me an offer to come manage a group of product managers in development tools.
Nice.
And I realized as I entered Apple, so Steve Jobs had left Apple already, but it was really his culture. And I realized that I had been thinking about leadership for a long time at that point. And so I spent 7 years at Apple, and then I was at a couple of small companies, and then I went to Charles Schwab, which is a stock brokerage in the United States, the largest cut rate stock brokerage, and one of the very first online stock brokerages, and I was in this second company, and I'd been thinking about that. I'd been thinking that at Apple I had seen the epitome of leadership in what Steve Jobs had done. There was sort of Steve. They talked about Steve as having a reality distortion field around him, and I thought of him as sort of leader as televangelist. Right, so he was the kind of leader who could get up on a stage and whether he was describing an organization or whether he was describing a product, he could make it swim in front of your eyes. You would see it palpably. This thing that didn't even exist yet, and so I was thinking of leader as televangelist, and then I got to Schwab and found what I believe to be another level higher than that.
Level higher.
A leader, which I described it, which I think it gets described as inspired leadership, and it's leaders who are willing to be vulnerable, leaders who share who they are and what their core values are in storytelling, and I found Chuck Schwab and his co-CEO Dave Pottruck and our CIO, who was heading the organization I was part of, a woman named Dawn Lepore, and the three of them were Dawn could get up, whether she was speaking to all 2,500 people in the technology organization, or she was talking to you one-on-one. You felt inspired talking to her, and part of it was that she shared who she was in a way. She shared vulnerability, as did Chuck Schwab, as did Dave Pottruck, and it was a level of leadership that I found. I was delighted to be inspired. I later learned that all three of them, Chuck Schwab and Dave Pottruck and Dawn Lepore, had been coached by the same guy. a guy named Terry
Yeah.
Pierce. Terry Pierce wrote a book called Leading Out Loud. And the Tom Peters organization, Tom Peters is a famous leadership writer. And Tom Peters put together an organization and put together some classes. And he turned Terry Pierce's book, Leading Out Loud, into a class. And I got to take that class and
How was it?
it was transformative, frankly. I went from believing that inspiration was something that Chuck and Dave and Don could do, but it didn't apply to me. I couldn't do that. To realizing that by opening up and being vulnerable and connecting my core values and my story of my core values and where they came from to the change message that I was trying to do. So I was leading an initiative at Schwab to move all of Schwab's software development, thousands of people doing software development, to use the same platform. Up until that point, teams could use any technology they wanted. And
Okay.
and that class helped me to understand how to do that.
So basically connecting to your human side and letting other people see it.
Yes. Yes.
Could you give like an example where could you give like an example where you showed your human side?
Yeah. So we were the initiative I was leading was to move. Up until that point, any project team could pick any technology it wanted, and so we had our data center, and we were of course on-prem in those days. This was 20 years ago. Our data center was supporting almost every technology that existed, from Microsoft to Java to various versions of C. I don't think we had any Spitball or Snowball, but we had almost every other language, and certainly COBOL. We had a ton of technologies, and I realized that I was not just leading a technology initiative, I was leading a culture change initiative. And the culture change was that we needed to the technology we were moving to is Java. And we were gonna do all of our new development in Java. And the culture change was that we needed to build a community of developers in Java, that we needed to not just do our best work to delight our customers, but we needed to share that work, and we needed to not reinvent things. And to come back to your question of an example, I grew up in a farming community, in a very prosperous farming community in the middle of the United States in Iowa. And
okay.
I remember when I was a kid, my dad would go down to the lumber store, the lumber yard, or the feed store, or the co-op, or to church. But he'd talk to other farmers, and they would share with each other what they were trying. They were trying contour farming, and they were trying different row widths with each other, and they were sharing what they were trying, what was working with each other. And that culture of sharing that I grew up with was indelibly linked to that culture of sharing that I was trying to create at Schwab.
It's interesting how you took something from your background and used it to drive you forward in your leadership position.
Yeah, and it's exactly what I found. What I realized that Chuck and Don and Dave had been doing all along was they were sharing who they were in the context of the change and leadership that they were trying to deliver.
Well, Ron, now I have another book on my back burner to read, Reading Out Loud. Okay, and now that you know, like your yes,
I have to say I took the class. I didn't read the book, but the class was stunning, and the class is based on the book, so the book should be a good one.
Are they still doing the classes, or from what you know, or not anymore?
The classes were originally were when I took them, they were done by Tom Peters' organization. They moved them over to another organization called Blessing White, which I believe is still delivering that class. Terry Pierce
Interesting.
himself died last year, and it was you could feel the change in the force.
Yeah, God bless him. Well, now let's shift a little gears and talk about a more unpleasant situation, which is like a leadership failure. But usually we learn more from our failures than from our successes.
So, yeah, it's not, I could probably come up with a bunch of different choices, but one of them, when I first became a manager, this was at Apple, and I had my experience of managers, my experience of leaders, my experience of bosses was that they fell into two camps. They either were micromanagers, they either told you every single thing to do, and I wasn't having any of that, or most of the managers I'd had were managers who threw you in the deep end and just watched to see whether you sank or swam. And I thought that was what being a manager was. You just handed a really hard problem to one of your employees and said, go. My first manager in programming, I'd walked in the door. He said, well, so we're going to, what I want you to do is I want you to take this program that was written in an assembly language that you've never seen before, but it's sort of like one and I want you to translate it into this higher level language that you also never seen before. And it's not a lot like anything but you'll figure it out. And oh, by the way, I'm going to Phoenix for 2 weeks. This is before cell phones. So I'm going to Phoenix for 2 weeks, and I'll be out of touch. And I'm sure you'll have it done by the time I get back.
No,
wow.
Making it super easy for you.
Yeah, making it super easy for me. And so I thought that's what management looked like. And I started this product management group, and my first employee was this kid straight out of college. He'd been an intern at Apple once before, and he'd come back, and he arrived in my group, and I did that. I gave him a hard problem and said, go figure it out. And then I went, and my boss said, we've got this thing called Apple University, and it's for managers to learn how to be better managers. And I went off and took this class called Situational Leadership, in which it talked about a third way, not throwing people in the deep end, not micromanaging, but actually delegating and supporting. And the difference between when you're a rookie and when you've got experience, or when you're being thrown into a new domain versus a domain that and as a manager, how you support people. And I came back from that class. It was just eye-opening for me. I looked at what I had done and said, "Oh my God, I did that to this person who works for me." And I came back and sat down with him and said, "Tom, I'm sorry. I threw you in the deep end, and I'm actually going to support you going forward." And he let out the biggest sigh of relief that I think I've ever gotten from somebody. And I thought, okay, I was right. I really did throw him in the deep end, and that really wasn't the right thing to do. And it was truly a failure on my part, and a recovery, thanks to getting some training and some understanding of how to be a better manager.
Yeah, that's why it's important. Let's say you take a promotion, you get into management. Okay, you might not know, but as long as you're learning and improving yourself, it's good. But if you just stay and you're not open to new ideas, new ways of approaching the same situations, it's not good for you, because you end up working 80-90 hour weeks, and you also end up burning out your whole team, and you're not going to make too many friends in that situation.
Yeah. we've got this idea when we go from being when we go from being a programmer to being a manager. We've got this idea. We bowled our way through one programming language after another. We bowled our way through one programming challenge after another, and we have this idea that we can just walk into managing without any experience, any training, any thought about it. I mean, somebody looked at us and said, "Well, you've got some people skills. You be the manager." And we think we can just bowl our way through it. And frankly, I'm really sorry for the very first employees I had, because it was, that's exactly how it works, is you sort of bowl your way through it because you don't have any experience or any training in it. And to your point, continuing to be a learner is probably the most important thing to being a manager.
Yeah, and it's something sad because as a developer, as a person working hands-on in the technical field, you have to learn all the time. So you're used to it. But I don't know, something happens when you move into management. It's like you forget that you used to learn each day new stuff. And you're like, oh, now I'm a manager. No need to learn any new techniques, anything else. I can finally jump off the hamster wheel and just enjoy my time, and you end up working more that way, and it's not a happy situation for anybody.
And it turns out it's a new hamster wheel.
Yes,
you just have to keep one. Yeah, bigger one, and you have to keep learning a whole new set of stuff.
Yes. And Ron, since you have so much experience, if you have to summarize like your leadership point of view and create like a sort of philosophy about leadership, what would that be?
Yeah, so I think that in our book we give a couple of pages to three different thought leaders in leadership and motivation. One of those is Maslow. Almost everybody knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
And we talk about how it applies to leadership and to programming management. Another one of those is Hertzberg, who talks about motivators and demotivators, which is really interesting stuff. It was a real aha for me. But coming back to your question, the third is a guy named Douglas McGregor. And Douglas McGregor in the 1950s and 1960s is the guy who posited that the kind of management that had been done up until then, industrial revolution kind of management, telling people what to do, being authoritarian, being repressive, actually, was he referred to that as X theory management, in which managers push down on their teams.
Yes.
And he posited that what we need going forward, and this is back in the 1950s, he posited that what we need going forward is something he called Y theory management, where the manager is the post on the Y character and is basically supporting the whole team. The manager's job is to be an enabler and an empowerer, and so that's how I think in a lot of ways. So Agile introduced the term. It didn't make up the term. The term's thousands of years old. Servant leadership, and servant leadership uses those same words that McGregor used in the 1950s. Words like enabling and empowering, and so I think my leadership philosophy goes to McGregor, and it goes to servant leadership, and it goes to the role that I think Agile calls on us as managers to take in an Agile organization, which is to create the culture that allows teams to thrive. That I believe that team joy and team productivity are indelibly linked. And if you can find ways for teams to feel joy, you'll also find ways for teams to be hyper productive, because they'll love working together and love delighting customers.
Oh, that's for sure. And it's interesting, like that it appeared like in the 50s, this idea, And what I find like interesting, it's not yet embraced by a wide set of managers yet. And you still have the industrial revolution type of managing happening now in creative industries. So it's not just software, anything that's creative. You cannot manage it like you would manage a factory, a plant. It's totally different because here you're trying to inspire people and get their best ideas out. They're not screwing the same screw each day, 8 hours a day. They're trying to find out new ways of doing stuff. And this is not, it's not something that lends itself to a top-down approach.
Yes, I find it sort of ironic that here's McGregor who's describing this in a book that he wrote in the 1960s about his research in the 1950s. And it takes 45 years until Agile comes along to just begin to introduce those ideas into our programming culture. Our book came out our book Managing the Unmanageable came out in the second edition just in December, and we added a chapter to it, and the chapter title is "If You Are Agile, What Do Managers Do?" And it's that shift in thinking from telling people what to do to enabling teams to do their best work.
To being a resource. That's what you have to be, basically, from my point of view, is you have to be a resource and help people help themselves, basically.
Yes.
Okay. So what would be your top 3 leadership tips you have for aspiring leaders?
So so I'm gonna phrase them in terms of rules of thumb. So my co-author and I built our book around rules of thumb. We had been my co-author and I had been friends for a decade at the point at which we decided to write a book, and we had been having both of Mickey was a CTO and a senior vice president of engineering at a really powerful entertainment software company. And I had been heading engineering at an entertainment software company that had more eyeballs than just about anybody else did. And at the point at which we got to know each other, and we'd been sitting down and having breakfasts on weekends every few weeks for a decade. And we found ourselves trading rules of thumb over the breakfast table about,
really nice.
About being effective in sort of mentoring each other and coaching each other. And we thought, why don't we collect those rules of thumb and put them into a book, and then ended up writing 9 and now 10 chapters around that. So the center of the book is 300 rules of thumb. And one of those is that, and one of those, come back to leadership tips, is that's really important to me is software development is a team sport. When I began training teams in so I started training teams in Agile. So I take on VP engineering roles, and I also train teams in Agile. I train executives in Agile, and 11 years ago, when I started training teams in Agile, I was fundamentally transforming waterfall teams to Agile, as all of us were, a decade and more ago. But in the last few years, what I find myself doing is transforming Agile teams to Agile. I very frequently there's the irony. It's a huge irony, and I walk in the door and I find too often that what I find is that it's not really a team; it's really a group of individuals who report to the same stand-up, and that's and they're all acting as individuals as opposed to acting as a team. And so my rule of thumb is that software development is a team sport, and it's really become a mantra for me over the last few years. So I was really gratified when I went and looked back at the book. The first edition of the book came out 8 years ago, and it's in there. So I was gratified to say this is not new with me. I knew this at least 8 years ago because Mickey and I put it into the book then. but it has really become a mantra for me. I think the corollaries to software development as a team sport are one, psychological safety. We as managers, we as leaders have to find ways to foment foment and foster psychological safety, because that's the fundamental that's the foundation of teamwork. It's the foundation of teams being joyful and productive, those two things together. And then secondly, to really foster self-organizing teams. And self-organizing teams,
Okay.
in my definition, are teams in which every single member of the team is a leader. Even the intern is a leader. Everyone on that team is unafraid of sharing from the knowledge base they've got, from the expertise base they've got. And if you don't have an intern who can do that, you probably hired the wrong intern, because you're going to get somebody out of college who's learned something that is new in the educational sphere that those of us who've been out of college for a while haven't heard about. And we want to bring that in. So we want, it's not like we want our intern to do the architecting. It's not like we want our architect to do the product management. It's not like we want our product manager to do the coding. We want everybody to bring their expertise to the party, and that leadership to pass back and forth among everybody on the team. And it's like, if you've got a really great programming team, it's like you've got a jazz group where everybody plays their instrument and everybody solos from time to time, and that soloing passes back and forth among the jazz group. And it passes back and forth transparently, because everybody listens to each other, and they're listening for, how do we as a team or jazz group make the kind of music and delight the customers in the way that we can all best do it together.
Oh, I love that metaphor. And it's important to have like knowledge sharing and everybody bringing their best foot forward in the team. So if you have even one team member, I find that's a knowledge hoarder who doesn't want to share, doesn't want to say what's on their mind, it really starts propagating through the whole team, and then it doesn't take long to have like castles.
Yeah, and so this is the castles. I like that. This is the challenge for those of us who are managers and leaders, is to connect with those people and to help them to see how much more they'll get out of it by not being a hoarder, but by being a sharer.
Yes. Oh, amazing. Now I know you've mentioned the book Leading Out Loud. Do you have another book that had a profound impact on you?
Can I name 4?
Oh yeah, sure. The more the merrier.
Okay, so I think one that is on almost every engineering manager's shelf, and probably should be, and it's not about leadership, it's about project management, but it's The Mythical Man Month by Fred Brooks.
Yes.
And it was written over 45 years ago, and yet it has truths.
It's still true. After all this time, it's a shame, but it's true.
Yeah, we're still challenged by the same misconceptions about software. Fred Brooks law. He coined Brooks law. Fred Brooks coined Brooks law that adding resources to a late project will make it later. And yet, all of us find ourselves from time to time in companies in which executives think that, oh, well, you guys are late. Let me just add a few more people to your team, and that'll solve the problem. And it's just Fred Brooks is just so succinct and so wonderful in describing how broken an idea that is, and what we have to do. And so I think that one's really important. I think from an inspirational standpoint, my favorite inspirational book about software development is a book called Joy, Inc. Joy comma INC for Incorporated or Joy Inc.
Yes.
This is Rich Sheridan's book, and it's a case study of a company that is more agile than most companies are, and it's a real story of inspiration. This is a story of Rich recreating a consulting company and trying to put joy back in software development consulting, which is a really hard. People are on the bench and they're working out in
Yes.
client companies, and it's a really hard thing. And I think he really did it, and I think it's a really inspirational story. And a third book for me is a book called Teamwork as an Individual Skill by Christopher Avery, and I really like how Christopher Avery thinks about teamwork and about each of us as individuals on a team need to own the team's output, team's outcomes. And if each of us owns the outcomes, then we will together own the outcomes. And it's a really helpful way of thinking about teamwork and the responsibilities that every member of a team has. Yes. And then the fourth book is a book that I came across last year that takes teamwork to the organizational level, to the tribal level. It's actually called Tribal Unity, by a woman named M.E.M. Campbell Pretty out of Australia. And Tribal Unity is inspiring from that notion of, well, it's not just a team, but it's a group of teams, and she uses the word tribe. It's a tribe of teams, and so an organization of 100, which is maybe 10 teams or 12. How do we create teamwork across that whole organization? Because the whole organization's working on when we've got a larger organization working on the same software, the same customers, the same this trying to create that same sense of delight in our our customer base. So there's four.
Oh, awesome books. More reading to be done. That's all I can say.
I know, so many books, so little time.
Oh yeah, I really have a backlog, and I'm adding more and more to it.
Me too.
Ron, if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
Well, so I have two websites. One is my own, so ronlichty.com. And if you have trouble spelling my name, then go to the other one, managingtheunmanageable.net. And some people have trouble spelling Managing the Unmanageable. So if you look up Managing the Unmanageable on Amazon, so it's got an E in there that some people forget to put in. But if you forget to put it in on Amazon, Amazon will still find it. So,
Okay.
So if you find Managing the Unmanageable on Amazon, then you can type in managingtheunmanageable.net. And my personal website, my consulting website, and our book website point to each other. So then you've got the spelling of both Ron Lichty and Managing the Unmanageable.
That's awesome.
So I should note that what you'll find on the websites, there are bonus tools that my co-author and I used and share for managing. There are a whole bunch more rules of thumb that we've continued to collect beyond the 300 that are in the book, which has been called the creamy center of the book, by the way. The results of, so I'm also the co-author of the study of product team performance, where we asked people on product teams all over the world to characterize their teams and their practices. And so the results of those studies are there on my consulting website. And then there are talks and writing that my co-author and I have done addressing specific challenges in managing software people and teams. And there are even pointers to the video training that we recorded through O'Reilly for software engineering managers, a video training called Managing Software and People and Teams Life Lessons.
Yeah. Well, at least get Ron's book, Managing the Unmanageable. I haven't read it yet, I have to be honest, but it's on my top priority. It bumped other books down. Get it. you'll get a wealth of information, I'm sure. It's been a pleasure having you, Ron, on the show. Thank you very much.
A delight. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
That was today's episode. Tune in daily. Rate, like, subscribe, and share, please. Oh, you can find further info and materials in the show notes on techyleadership.com, including links to the guest book recommendations.